All right. Well, I am super excited today because we're going to be talking to someone who I met from the virtual summit world, someone who has also hosted quite a few virtual summits. Although he himself is not an Amazon seller, he knows quite a bit about selling on Amazon because he has hosted several virtual summits for Amazon sellers, people that are, whether you're selling in the US or in Europe. And he also has put together some live in-person conferences, and he also has a YouTube channel where he brings on experts. So sometimes it's interesting to talk to people who are able to see the forest through the trees, so to speak. Someone who's kind of knows enough to help kind of direct the conversation, but also can bring, like not quite in the middle of everything, so they can have quite a unique perspective. So super excited to get into it. And if you find this video to be helpful, please consider giving us a thumbs up as well as subscribing to this channel. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into the interview. Thanks. All right. So have you ever thought about getting different perspectives on this whole world of e-commerce and selling and things of that nature? Well, I recently hosted a summit called the PPC Mastery Summit. And I reached out to someone who also had done some virtual summits in the Amazon e-commerce world and realized this is someone who, even though he doesn't sell in e-commerce, he actually knows quite a bit about the world of e-commerce because he's hosted all these virtual summits for e-commerce sellers and gotten to talk to a lot of really smart people. So really excited to have with me Augustas Kligys from OrangeClick. Augustas.
Hello, Kevin. Nice to be here. All good. Thanks.
Yeah, super excited to have you here. So tell us just a little bit about your background and how you even got into the world of knowing Amazon even had third-party sellers and all that.
Yeah, so I used to be a web developer, freelance web developer, digital nomad already 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And I was a little bit tired of programming websites, and I was looking for other opportunities to make money online or to do something with the computer because I'm computer addict practically.
Right.
And and 5 years ago, someone from my family showed this Amazon FBA business model, but it didn't work for me at the moment because I didn't have funds to invest. But it was super interesting for me. So I was following all the Facebook group communities available at that time. And later, maybe half a year later, I got to know about another business model called Virtual Summit. So at the end, I decided to combine Amazon FBA with Virtual Summit business model. And this is how 4 years ago, I launched my first Virtual Summit in this space.
Gotcha. So you were just kind of curious about the whole Amazon thing and said, why don't I just bring together a bunch of Amazon sellers and people in that world and talk to them? Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, actually, no, yeah, the first virtual summit was called European Private Label Summit. And I created specifically about Europe because I realized that a lot of people were asking in Facebook groups questions related to European Amazon marketplaces. And there were even now, there is not so much information about these marketplaces. People are always asking, and because of these language barriers and everything. So I just decided to interview some of the known people in the space to talk to them about European marketplaces. Of course, when you talk about European marketplaces, a lot of information is universal. You can apply in US and other marketplaces, like maybe advertising strategies and everything. But still, there were some topics like taxes, language differences, and culture differences. So this is how I think, this is how I came up with the first idea, just to bring additional value to the people selling in Europe.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So what were your takeaways from that one? I know probably some of it has changed over the last few years.
Yeah, it was 4 years ago. It was, for me, more takeaways were, from organizing, jumping into I'm from Lithuania. It's a small country in Eastern Europe. I'm not native English speaker, so it was very interesting to see how it all developed, because most of the things you listen online is from English speaking countries. And I managed to get into this space and create this interviews. I was very nervous. Of course, I didn't know so much about, I didn't know any practical information about Amazon. I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of maybe theoretical background by reading all the blogs and podcasts. But overall, it was very exhausting journey creating a virtual summit, a big job. But afterwards, I was very satisfied. I grew my email list from 0 to, I think, like 1,500.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe during the summit, I had 2,000 subscribers, and then of course people dropped after some time.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, and then I thought, what do I do next? And then I developed a few more virtual summits. I get got in touch with different influencers in the niche in this Amazon FBA space. And I actually later on I realized that a lot of big names were on my first virtual summit email list, like Manny Coates and Kevin King. They were like silently
Oh
looking
yeah,
at,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then later they jumped and connected to me. So it was interesting to observe that it's such a small space and everybody's like watching each other, so with the secret email addresses and so
All
on.
right. Everybody's kind of curious, like what else is going on
Yeah,
there. So.
yeah, actually, me, I also use some other email address when I want to sign up for, even maybe for your virtual summit, I sign up with some email address so that nobody
Oh,
knows
okay,
that
gotcha.
I'm
So I'll have
there.
to figure out which one it was.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just, it's nicer to be undercover when you are
Sure, sure,
observing
sure.
someone in the space.
Well,
Yeah.
good, 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 good. All right. So how many virtual summits have you ended up doing in the Amazon space?
Yeah, so the first one was 4 years ago, and then in the next, I think, 2.5 years, I did uh, six in total, six.
Mm,
I repeated the same one. The first one I repeated other 2 more years. So there was a 3 series, 3 years in a row. I did a few more virtual summits, more special. One was about Amazon Q4,
hmm.
and there were two different summits which were more general for broader audience, universal topics, for all marketplaces. But then I transitioned into live events, in-person conferences here in Europe. So
Oh, gotcha.
this became my kind of new passion for bringing people together.
Gotcha. That's interesting because I've got more experience on the in-person event side, and in the in-person event side, which I'm sure you probably experienced too, there's a lot more uncertainty as we record this with COVID and social distancing rules and stuff. So, where do you see the future of live events going? Just out of curiosity.
Because of this crisis, which was here or which is right now, you mean?
Yes, like kind of like now of where we're at today. Where do you see us in 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road?
I really wanted to create about 6 or 8 events this year. So far,
Hmm.
I made only one event. It was probably the last Amazon event before the lockdowns in the world. But I don't really have much hope to create an event this year because I'm sure a lot of countries, they will have all these regulations, especially which I don't like is a social distancing in the event. So if there is a requirement to be with a distance between the participants,
Right.
it's maybe hard to make money to monetize as an event organizer because you
Hmm.
cannot have too many people in the room, but also it's very bad experience for people which are coming from different countries to my events because I do events in Europe and it's international event. So I personally, I'm not expecting or I'm not putting too much hope to do any events this year, but I do hope like next year from February will be back to normal. I hope so.
Yeah, yeah. For those that are listening, maybe haven't heard me talk about it. Brand Accelerator Live, we moved to virtual in September, and then we're in the middle of negotiations with the hotel to move the contract a year to September of 2021. Because yeah, it's one of those crazy things, and so and in talking to people in the event space, there's a lot of question marks as far as like what is it going to look like? Like a schoolroom table is about 6 feet long. The ones where you sit and like you have room to write in front of you. Well, there's talk about like having one chair where normally there'd be three chairs in a 6 foot schoolroom table. So that just to your point, it creates a weird vibe in the room. It's like you go there to be amongst other people, and Yeah, that's the advantage of an in-person event. So are you going to do
Yeah,
more?
yeah,
Sorry,
we
go ahead.
were. Yeah, we did. I did a live event called PPC Congress one year, like last autumn in September in
Hmm.
Amsterdam, and we were planning to repeat it this September, October again.
Mm.
And it we just asked for the venue for 100 people. And recently we got an email from one of the hotels in Amsterdam saying that our group is too big for their venue because of the regulations of social distancing, and they send us the table with all the numbers, and they said like it looks like maximum we could have like 40, 50 people in the
Oh,
big,
wow.
in like in
Hmm.
the combination of all 3 or 4 big conference rooms. So it's like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah. And having been in the convention world, I know that those tables are oftentimes, as if all you did was just have tables and chairs in the room and no space for audio visual or a table in the back or whatever the case is. Like those numbers are unrealistic. So it's probably even less than that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a much different experience for folks. Do you envision doing more virtual summits?
I might do. It's, to be honest, yeah, in-person event is much more, I'm more passionate. It's just something new. I did enough virtual events.
Right.
It's a lot of work, so I'm just tired of this stress. And so I decided to move to another kind of stress in-person event. But if really this year we're not able to organize any in-person events, I will do some virtual event,
Hmm.
but I will see. I would like to bring something maybe completely new, new concept of something. It can be difficult because now everybody is doing virtual events and there are a lot of different platforms. Everybody is testing a lot,
Hmm.
and but it's. I'm also focusing. We run a YouTube channel where we interview. We practically do the same what we do with virtual summits. Interview
Hmm.
experts. You call your channel or your interviews a podcast. We don't call it. We just publish everything on YouTube. So
Mm.
we're just creating these interviews with all different experts in the industry, continuing doing the same. Of course, part of the income is affiliate income,
Hmm.
but we are more focusing on the value than on making money and building the audience. And then whenever we create kind of events, some kind of events, we could promote them to our audience. Uh, but yeah, I cannot say. It's something in me. I would like to do one more virtual summit because this is how people know me in the industry. And
Sure.
I think you already mentioned, or you mentioned before the call, I run the website amzsummits.com,
Hmm.
and it's a compilation of all the Amazon related conferences, virtual and in person. And
Hmm.
this is another kind of my passion to collect information and deliver to the people in the industry. So I'm observing what's happening in the space. I'm more or less, I know more or less all the events which happening in Europe, in US. I don't know so much about Asian market because it's different languages, so I don't understand.
Right.
So it's more difficult to track them. But whatever gets into my mailbox or on Facebook, I track it and I put on amzsummits.com. But yeah, I'm still into events. It's interesting.
Yeah, that was the thing is you and I had connected because I just happened to go on amzsummits.com. I was like, oh, this would be a great place. Maybe they can uh, list the virtual summit, which you were kind enough to do. And, so you're seeing all these different events and you talk to different people, both in the summits you've done and the live in-person events. And, also now that you're interviewing people on your YouTube channel. So do you mind saying what observations are you getting about maybe the future? Now we talked about the future of events, but let's talk about the future of Amazon, or maybe where you see it is today. Um, is kind of someone who's watching is kind of like a coach of the team. So maybe you're not out there on the field playing, but you get a very good view of what's going on in the field.
I think I still see this struggle of non-English Amazon marketplaces for
Mm.
sellers to go into these marketplaces. It was the same 5 years ago, 4 years ago when I created my first events.
Hmm.
And even now, I see it's the same struggle. So I think it's big opportunity still for all the people who are successful in, let's say, UK or US
Hmm.
markets to go into these other language markets. I know it's very challenging. I'm European, even for us Europeans, sometimes, it's too, we don't understand the neighboring country language. So
Hmm.
you always run in your, when I organize events, I noticed that it's kind of difficult for me to convince people to travel to another country to my event,
Mm.
even if it's in English, just because in Europe we live in our culture, in our language, and you don't really know what's happening across the border in because everything is different. I mean, not everything is different, but the language is different, so you don't understand. But I think there is a lot of potential, and that's why also on my YouTube channel I try to bring a bit more European talents to, of course, we do interviews with known experts in the industry, but we also
Hmm.
try to dig out these other talents and ideas, because I traveled a lot and I know how important it is to connect to different cultures, because it opens your mind, and sometimes
Hmm.
you see the same thing from different perspective after talking to people from different cultures. Yeah, so I think there is still a kind of I would encourage people to look into foreign language marketplaces, because most of the people don't look at it. But I understand, like US market especially is, if you're doing well in US, I remember when I talked to some big sellers, they are happy with US results, and it doesn't make sense to go and struggle and, you know, climb their way in European marketplaces. So they just keep staying and making money in US. But yeah, I think there is a big potential in that.
Yeah, I agree. You're as a seller are just leaving money on the table if you're not starting to grow into other marketplaces, because when you look at it, it's a function of time. So in a year from now, it's going to be a year from now, and there's going to be X number of impressions out there that potentially could see your listings. And so if you can get into more marketplaces, you get more impressions, more clicks, more people buying. And so, like, if you open up in Germany, that's not preventing you from getting any of your sales in the US. Like, one has nothing to do with the other. It just opens up to more customers. Now, I always suggest, my progression to folks is start in the US, go to Canada, then go to the UK, then start going to Germany, some of the foreign language marketplaces. In your perspective, what do you think is preventing people from going into, let's say, Germany? The fear of the different language.
Yeah, I think two things is the language and all these legal regulations, which in
Mm,
Europe can be complex. Once I think American CPA told me in US you first do business and then you comply with the rules, and
right.
in Europe first you have to comply with rules. If you don't, you will pay big fines, which makes sense. And even for us Europeans, we're like sometimes not happy about all this bureaucracy which you have to go through in order
Hmm.
to sell the first product. Like VAT is a big thing in Europe, and European countries are very, very sensitive if there is a VAT abuse.
Hmm.
So yeah, if you start selling in Europe without VAT, even probably now in these days, probably even Amazon would not approve your account if you don't provide VAT numbers. So this legal tax issues and also languages, because then you need to rely on someone, let's say translator, and first when you don't have money, maybe you take cheap translators from Fiverr or Upwork,
Right. It could just be using
and
Google Translate.
Google Translate, and then you don't see results maybe, and then you think, okay, it doesn't make sense to go deep. So I think, yeah, it's two main things. And also the culture, of course,
Mm,
like maybe French, Spanish, and German people are very different. For example, once my wife is German, so I lived in Germany for a few years, and about maybe 7 years ago, when we just got our child, he was baby, and we bought some not disposable but washable diapers from China, and we liked them very much. They were from some kind of bamboo thing, And I thought, why not to sell this good product on eBay? So I bought like 50 or 100 of them, and nobody was buying on eBay because the only questions I was asked by the people interested, which brand it is. And I said, there is no brand. It's just, and nobody bought because there is no brand. So in Germany,
Mm.
it's really, if you want to sell something used, then make sure it's a known brand. So whenever a few months ago, I bought something from Canon in Spain, and I was in Spain, but I was waiting until we go back to Germany for a visit so that I can sell that thing, because I didn't need that thing. But I knew that Canon product will be sold very well in German eBay. So
Oh, gotcha.
this kind of cultural differences, like Germans, I think, like they need quality and the brand names. Maybe French a bit more relaxed, and I don't know either myself about all these different cultural differences. But
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, having it there, even with Google Translate, if you have, let's say, um, inventory in the UK, because then they can just send it there. Now, over time, you might have to end up registering for VAT in Germany, but as long as, I always talk to a VAT professional, but as long as you're following the rules of the bureaucracy, as you said, generally you'll be fine. But you're probably right smack on the nose there. A lot of Americans kind of have this like, just get started and figure it out later. It's kind of the American spirit, I guess. Um, so another thing about the American spirit is most people speak English, maybe a little bit of Spanish, just because that's a more prevalent language nowadays in a lot of parts of the country. Just out of curiosity, how many languages do you speak?
I could conversate in 5 languages: Lithuanian, Russian, English, German, and Spanish.
Wow. So you've got a very kind of multicultural view of things, whereas in America, we're also tend to be very much in our little bubble. And, Canada, north of us, is very similar to the US in a lot of regards, culturally anyway. Um, it's not the same, but it's very similar. Mexico, different language. It's probably more kind of like how Europe is, where one country maybe has, one language, and another country has its own language, its own culture, and everything. So, um, but in Europe, there's a little bit more kind of free trade amongst borders, and there's more that happens more often. Is that a fair trade or fair point that in Europe it's more common trade amongst countries and doing business with each other?
Of course, it's kind of, you need to do exchanges of your goods and trades between the countries, otherwise we would not survive. Even let's say my country is in Eastern Europe, and in Eastern Europe, in Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, there is a lot of let's say propaganda, anti-Russian propaganda. So there are a lot of, they are always criticizing in the media Russians, but a lot of people they are running businesses, and they are making money just because of Russia, because they are selling or buying something from Russia.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah. So I think there is a lot of exchange in these countries, a lot.
Yeah, and one of the nice things is, at least with Amazon in Europe, is that let's say you're offering something in Amazon.de Germany, you could get people buying in Austria or Belgium, from there as well. So you open up the doors to a lot of people by offering your stuff in the United Kingdom.
Yes, actually, yeah, Amazon European marketplace is designed so that even, yeah, you don't need to send products to Germany in order to sell in Germany. You can just store everything in UK. And whenever I buy something in let's say when I'm in European country where Amazon exists, sometimes I don't even know that it is being shipped from UK, and just
Right.
in the tracking, it's a Prime product, but in the tracking it says that it will take 3 days or maybe 2 days to arrive from UK. But yeah, it's how to say, not, it's transparent, or it's not visible, or it's invisible for the buyer where
Right. It
this
doesn't say it
product
like
is.
on the
Yeah.
listing page.
Yeah. So you don't even know where it's stored. So it's really Amazon system is set up really smart, in a smart way that, yeah, you can, maybe it's important to know for North American sellers, maybe not everybody knows that really you can just send your products to one country of Amazon, but in that country you need to comply with tax rules, and then that's it. You send there. There will be maybe a little bit higher cost for shipping products because Amazon will have to ship across the borders.
Hmm.
But once you grow into a certain amount of sales, you can register for so-called Pan-EU program by Amazon, and
Hmm.
Pan-EU is in this case, you would need to register VAT in 7 different
Hmm.
countries where Amazon has warehouses. But in that case, Amazon would distribute by themselves your products into the warehouses across different countries where the sales are happening. But yeah, actually, it's important also to know not to click the Pan EU button somewhere,
Oh, no, 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 no.
not to enroll into this, being excited, but because Amazon might be pushing this hard. But
Yes.
before clicking that button, you need to have 7 VATs, and it means like maybe $4,000-5,000 a year expense. So.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I'm glad you said that because Amazon really is pushing you towards that. And so for the sake of people that are not familiar, in the US, we tend to do sales tax based on where the customer lives. Whereas in Europe, it tends to be where the inventory was shipped to the customer from. I'm oversimplifying it, but if let's say somebody buys in our example of, on amazon.de in Germany and it's shipped from the UK, the VAT for that sale would go to the UK government in most cases, unless you're registered in Germany. So when you click on um, the uh,
Uh,
the button
Pan
for
EU.
Pan EU, Amazon does what Amazon likes doing, which is here in the States, if let's say I send inventory to North Carolina, they might send some to Indiana, they might send some to Michigan, they may send some to Arizona. I mean, they'll just move it around wherever they want because they're trying to get it to the customer. And so they like having that same level of control in Europe, which is possible with the asterisk of you as the seller are now on the hook in all those different countries for VAT. And to your point, it's very expensive to register. So it's kind of a trade-off. You could be saving about €1, depends on the marketplace, but it's about €1 per fulfillment fee, which let's say that's $1.10 or whatever that you're saving for every product that doesn't cross the border because it might stay within the country. So you have lower uh, FBA fees, but the problem is now you're paying all these things. And what gets kind of wonky is you also have to end up paying VAT all the time. So whereas like in UK, you file quarterly. In Poland and Czech Republic, which there's not even an Amazon marketplace, but they do have fulfillment centers. So those are 2 of the 7 countries you have to register in. You might send like I was doing Pan EU for a year just because I wanted to see what the experience was like because Amazon was going to pay for it. So I was like, oh, why not? And it was like I might send the equivalent of $13 a month to Poland because I'd get like a couple of orders or something like that that shipped from Poland to somewhere else. So yeah, it's totally one of those things. If you're going to click that box, be very intentional about why you're clicking it and that you have the compliance set up on the back end and that that even if the savings are worth your while, is it worth your extra time to administer it, even if you have somebody doing the filings for you? Because you still have work to do.
Maybe it's important also to know for your listeners that you must comply with VAT rules whenever your goods touch the ground of specific country. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
storing, if Amazon is storing your goods in Polish or Czech fulfillment centers, which are fulfilling orders to
Right.
Germany most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
then whenever your product hits the ground of Poland, from that moment you must comply with VAT rules. And then I don't even know all this how it's calculated, but it's very complicated. You should outsource, of course, this work to
Yeah,
someone.
that
But
There's some countries you can kind of DIY, like Canada. It's like 6 boxes. You have to file once a year. You can figure it out. I had somebody do it for me this year, but I calculated it on my own just to see if I was doing it right. And they came up with the exact same number I did. Whereas with Europe, you're talking about sometimes multi currencies. So you've got sales in euros, but you owe pounds for that to the British government. Or if you're doing pan European, you might, the Czech Republic and Poland both have their own currencies. They're not on the euro. So it gets even more wonky. Now, that sometimes when we start talking about stuff like that, people are like, oh my gosh, that's all the reason why I shouldn't sell in Europe. And I say, oh my gosh, that's all the reason you should be selling in Europe, because it scares away your competition. So just know, because it's a little scarier, chances are you're going to have less competition.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So what other pieces of advice have you kind of picked up for Amazon sellers along the way?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, but I think it applies to all kind of businesses to take action. You know, let's say
Mm,
someone wants to try Europe, and it sometimes happened to myself that I'm thinking about something for, let's say, several months or even
hmm.
years. Let's say like I was dreaming of creating an in-person event, but the first steps are always very scary. And I think it's important, like your friend Scott Walker says, take action. I think it's like,
Right, 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 right.
yeah, yeah. I like this, and I whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, those who are maybe struggling with money and they are seeing what I do and they want to get inspiration, I just say like, yeah, just do things blind and just do it. It's important to do it, and once you do it, this energy rolls and then it shows you the way. So it's the same for Amazon sellers, I think. And another thing, of course, I'm maybe biased, but when I organize events, I see how much powerful connections people can get when they go into events. So you don't even need to go to events. Participate in some communities, or
Hmm.
create some masterminds where you can meet every week or every 2 weeks. And to create a mastermind, it's quite easy. Just go to some random Facebook group and post, I want, people, 5, 6 sellers who are doing, let's say, 6 figures already. I want to mastermind and exchange
Hmm.
ideas every week, and I'm sure you will get responses very fast. So it's important to create some kind of community around yourself and talk to them, because yeah, knowledge is very powerful when you exchange.
Yeah, that's so true, because, you said two big things there. And the first one about taking action. And I think somewhat it's like you can learn the philosophy of stroke techniques, but until you actually jump in the pool, you'll never learn how to swim. And reading books about like the biography of Mark Spitz, or what's his name, the guy that won all those medals the last few years. I'm drawing a blank. The
I
Americans.
Bolt? No, the runner? No, I don't know
No,
which
no,
medals.
no, no. The swimmer, the swimmer. Oh, I can picture his
Phil,
face. He
something
has the
Phil.
most.
Yeah,
But
Philip.
anyway,
No.
I'm sure people are probably going to like get with me, like, oh yeah, you were talking about so and so, the guy who has so many gold medals recently. Uh, but yeah, so basically, you can read his biography, but until you jump in the pool, you're never going to learn how to swim. And so it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. You can read blog posts and, watch our interviews and stuff like that, but until you actually start doing, you learn so much more in the doing, and that all the other stuff you've been studying starts to have more context too. And then the part about, getting to know other people, I mean, we oftentimes, as I was saying before, you can't see the forest through the trees because you're so in your own head, and having someone outside of that kind of understands it, that can help point you in the right direction, you pick up a lot quickly in conversations, especially if it's, you know, a vocal conversation like this, ideally face to face, but Zoom or phone is great too, because it's that interaction. Whereas, in Facebook groups, you don't know what their intent always is, because a lot of our
Yeah,
intent sometimes is in our tonality and things like that, and you don't get that in writing. So
yeah. Whenever
anyhow.
it's something in writing, it's very dangerous. When there are
Right,
emotions,
exactly.
it's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can get two different people read it and get completely opposite
Yeah.
ideas of what the person was trying to get across.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, if somebody wanted to check you out and follow you a little more deeply, where would they go?
Well, you can just type in Google Orange Click Amazon. Click is spelled Klik, but you can spell in a regular way, and I think Google will show you. But add Amazon at the end, or you can just write Orange Click Augustus. Probably you will find it. It's the easiest way, just through Google. And what else? Yeah, also check amzsummits.com. It's a website where we manually collect information about different events around the world, mostly Europe, US, and what else? Yeah, and if you are in Europe, check out Orange Click website. Maybe we are hosting some kind of event for Amazon sellers, and you're welcome to come.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, appreciate having you on, Augustas.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye bye.
Thanks.